driving with it.
Call the UAB meeting to order. First order of business, I believe, is roll call.
Yes. Member Covey,
Here.
Member Rockwell,
Here.
Member Foltz,
Here.
Member Paul,
Here.
Member Sperlingwood is absent, Member Morse is absent, and Chair Jacobson.
Here.
All right, we can have roll call.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to adoption of the agenda.
And Member Crowe?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I get for trying to do anything from memory. My apologies. Member
Very short
Crowe.
chair.
Member Crowe is with us. Never try to do things from memory, Robin.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Do we have
Second.
we have a motion or a second? Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes, so we're doing some makeup here. So I would accept a motion related to the minutes.
Move that we accept the minutes?
Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
A second and a third. Any discussion from the UAB? Anything from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Moving right along to the ever-popular state of the utility.
Yes, so, Mr. Chair, members, so if you remember, I think it was last meeting, or maybe the meeting before last, we gave a quarterly update, or we had passed out the quarterly update, which was for actually the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, which was through September 30th. This is the first quarter of this fiscal year, 23, which is essentially October through the end of December. And so we've got several folks here. We're going to start with our Chief Customer Officer. So several folks here are going to get up and kind of give a high-level overview of each of the areas of the report. So we have our Chief Customer Officer, our Chief Energy Supply Officer, Chief Energy Delivery Officer, and our Chief Water Wastewater Officer. So with that, Mr. Kinzon Hutchinson will kick us off.
And I have to say, you'll have to forgive me. I left him out of the group email when I said, send me your highlights, so he's not on the slides, but we love him anyway.
All right, so,
And before you start, Kinzon, I just want to let everybody know, this has been a couple days like this. The microphones that are in front of us, you can't turn them off. They're working on them. It's been like that for about a week, so just so everybody knows, your microphone is on all the time.
all right, Mr. Chair and Board, I'm Kinzon Hutchinson, Chief Customer Officer. Just a few highlights from the customer support area. Starting off really with some really good news as it relates to energy and business services. Over the first quarter, we were able to complete 350 between LEAP and energy surveys for our residents. Spending from a resident for LEAP dollars, somewhere around about $651,000 over the first quarter for home improvement. So really excited about that. Customers have been really ecstatic. We do have a really long pool of people really trying to navigate through that process. And so really excited about being able to serve our customers in that capacity. Also, we work with the media to inform customers about energy savings during extreme weather. So of course it was some cold some hot and just so the fact that we were able to really let our customers know that, hey, there are some savings tips, some things that we can do to make sure that we're energy efficiency through the end of the year or the first quarter. And then lastly, I wanted to kind of address the meter reading related billing issues that we've had out there. So we've really diverted all of our resources to getting those utility bills out to our customers. I think we're somewhere down about 2,000 bills that have not invoiced yet. Making a lot of progress on that, but we've really navigated down through that process. We have been updated, and I'll let the energy delivery officer speak on this, but we have been able to maintain meter readers, which has prevented us from doing any type of estimations. And it's just navigating through the new meter readers that are out there. And we are doing that, so very excited about the fact that we are getting those reads down. We are getting bills out to our customers, constantly communicating to them where we are and how they can be assisted through that process. And so, although that's not the best of that highlight, we're still trying to get those done, but we are working towards getting those done for our customers. All right.
Before you leave, that just real quick, appreciate what you guys, LEAP's very exciting, that's the fun part, but the meter read, I know that's been painful. I'm sorry you guys have to go through that because it hasn't been easy. Just so we can inform people, at this point, are you still having to do estimated billing, or is that a thing of the past?
No, so we're not doing any mass estimations now. We do have estimations in the case where we may not be able to get to the meter through lock gate or bad dog or some things like that. But as it relates to mass estimations, we are not doing that anymore.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any questions for me? Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all so much.
All right.
That's a big change from what we heard earlier.
Yes, it is.
Yes, so we haven't done any of the mass estimations since December 5th, but that there was still the cascading effects to the bills that are still being cleared up. So, Mr. Carroll, I believe you're up next.
Good evening, Chairman and board members. Tony Carroll, I'm the Energy Delivery Officer acting. And do you have any slides for me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, you just have to act them out.
You should have a,
Clicker.
Oh. There we go.
back one, there you go. I know it's small, but.
Okay, I can see it. All right, well, first thing we'll talk about is, speaking of the meters, we're happy to report that we have had no mass estimations since December the 5th of 22. So, and we don't plan on having any more of those. We had a Hurricane Nicole occurred and impacted us in early November, I believe it was. And during the peak of the outages, occurred about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was around 6,000 customers. But we had all the customers' power restored in a little over 24 hours. And so we did call in some mutual aid due to all the line worker vacancies at the time. And we called in pipe contractor, also City of Stark came in to help us, and Riviera Utilities out of Foley, Alabama came in and provided some mutual aid. As far as major projects we've had going on in the substation and relay group, during this first quarter, they replaced 2 138 kV breakers, and they did perform testing on 4 transformers for energy supply during one of the outages. And they also replaced a bus tie switch at Fort Clark substation. And as far as on the distribution side, some major projects that we had completed was we installed 10 electronic reclosers. The reason there were so many is because we were having to wait for the reclosure due to supply chain issues to finally come in, and they finally all came in. And so that was one of our goals, was to get it done by the end of the calendar year. And so we've had them installed, and they've been programmed and commissioned. And so it took a coordination effort among several different departments. And so that was successful. And let's see, as far as to report the reliability results, now some of the results, some of the numbers, especially the Florida municipal max, is going to be different than what you have in your slides or your paper copy. And that's because we're trying to work towards a request that one of you had, and that was you want us to start comparing, you know, our reliability numbers to other municipalities in Florida. And we're going to limit it to municipalities on the quarterly basis because as far as all the other utilities other than municipalities, they only report theirs once a year and make that information public. And so we could report it at the end of the year and compare ourselves to the co-ops and also the IOUs, but they usually don't. In other words, let's see, they're reporting their numbers for 2002 on April the 1st. Of this year, and so that's how far they lag. But we can obtain the municipality numbers from FMPA, and we get that from them monthly. And so just felt like I needed to explain that. So as far as SADI, and remember that has to do with duration, for the first quarter, we had 10.35 minutes, and with our goal is 55 minutes. And you know, so far we're having a great year, by the way. That's the best numbers we've had in 4 years for the first quarter. And for safety, that's the frequency, and it's 0.18 when our goal for the year is 1. And the Florida municipal max was 3.387. And so for Katie, and again, that's all the customers that were actually had an outage. The number of minutes total divided by the number of customers who had an outage. And that number is 58.87 minutes. And our goal for that is 60 minutes. And you'll notice as the year goes on, that number will fluctuate because it's really a ratio of the SADI divided by safety. And so depending on how we're doing either one of those, the ratio of the result could be greater or less. Number of incidents, 154. And we have a goal of 790 in that area. And now we'll talk about damages to the natural gas system. Out of all the total damages, 70% were done by contractors, 18% by other utilities, and 12% by homeowners. And as far as incidents by cause, of the number of 154 incidents, 44 were caused by equipment failure, 41 was by vegetation, and 22 were undetermined, and 20 were caused by animals, 18 were caused by humans, and 9 were caused by the weather.
Just before you leave this slide, just to clarify, so when you say fiscal year 2023 Q1, that's when the report's done, but is this all for Q4 of 2022?
No, the numbers I'm giving out right now, that is for Q1. So it'd be of fiscal year 23.
Oh, 20.
October
Got it.
1st.
So it's
through
October
I keep forgetting.
1st through,
Thank you.
yes.
And that's fiscal year 23 that started in
Yes.
October of 22. Thank you.
It's difficult for us to keep straight too.
And then safety, so do you expect, if your goal is 1, do you expect the quarter to be 0.25 or do you expect the quarter to be 1?
Well, for a
that-
quarter, we would expect, to be 0.25 or less.
Okay.
Yes.
I
So
wasn't
we're exceeding our expectations right now.
So I wasn't sure between SADI, safety, and however you say the last one, which ones are additive and which ones are ratios that you'd expect it to be.
Yes, SADI and safety are both cumulative, so they would typically increase as the year goes on. And Katie is the one that's an average, and it's going, or not an average, it's a ratio.
Right.
of SAIDI divided by SAFE. So depending on how you're doing on SAIDI or SAFE, that number's gonna go up or down. But typically, it's gonna increase.
So just a suggestion might be to say that this is your quarterly goal, like for safety, would be 0.25, just to make it easier on us.
Oh, okay. We could list it that way. Sure.
Does that make sense for everyone else?
I had the exact same question actually about, whether those were cumulative or not, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
Anyone else? I don't see any lights, so we'll continue on.
All right, Mr. DeLeo. We'll do energy
Thank you.
supply.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and Board members. Dino DeLeo, Energy Supply Officer. So I'm going to cover 3 items in our highlight section. One of the major objectives for energy supply for fiscal year 2023 was predicated around Deerhaven 1. Deerhaven 1 was put in service in 1972, was scheduled to retire this past December after 50 years of operation. You may recall previously in the RRP process that we started in 2018 and had a report in 2019, we were not in a position financially to replace those 80 megawatts. So we started out in 2020 determining what were our options. And one of our options was doing engineering analysis on the unit to see if we could safely and reliably extend the life of the unit. We had done something similar to this for Kelly Unit 8 back in 2012. So we contracted with our original equipment manufacturer, which is Siemens, for our turbine, and looked at the critical components. And turbines are predicated on metallurgy. Metallurgy is what fails on a turbine after 50 years of cycles and fatigue. So we focused on the turbine rotor, the generator rotor, and the steam chest, internal steam chest. And we contracted that particular work, and we had an outage this past fall. During the planned outage, which we would not have had, that would have been the end of life for Deerhaven 1, but we planned a regular outage, and we did the lifetime assessment, which consisted of that engineering analysis. So both rotors went gone off-site. The steam chest was analyzed on-site, and I'm happy to report that all the engineering analysis we have so far, and we expect the final report this month, shows that we can safely, reliably extend the life of Deerhaven 1 up to 5 years. Doesn't mean we'll get 5 years, and it won't go past 5 years. We have a safe path to get to 55 years of operation for Deerhaven 1. For the unit, as we sit here today, not only is Deerhaven 1 online, but Deerhaven 1 is probably generating electricity that's in this particular room right now. It's operating. So again, we're waiting for the final engineering analysis, so it's a win for us. It delays us having to replace those 80 megawatts. The next under the highlights involves Deerhaven Renewable. For those of you that have toured the site, you know when the wood arrives, there's a live yard and a dead yard where the wood comes in. The dead yard is where operators actually push the wood with bulldozers to underground reclaimers that feed the boiler. That's typically done Monday through Friday when operators are there. And then after hours and on weekends, we have this auto reclaimer. So look at it as a very large turret, about a 128-foot turret, weighs 2.2 million pounds, and it's got a chain pulley, and it pulls the wood into an underground reclaimer and feeds the boiler after hours and on weekends. Well, that failed in the fall, so there is a roller bearing that supports about 1.5 million pounds of that turret that failed and would not rotate any further. So we have contracted, identified the OEM, and procured a new bearing. The bearing did not exist, had to be manufactured. That just arrived last week. We have all the parts. We have 2 contractors provided us quotes for actually lifting the $1.5 million auto reclaimer, pull the old bearing out, and put the new bearing in. We're waiting for the final quote. We expect to start that work in March and have the auto reclaimer back in service by the middle of April. But meanwhile, the plant now has to push 724, 365. And the way natural gas prices have been, the operating tempo for Deerhaven Renewables has been about 87 megawatts average throughout the day. So it takes a strain on the plant and the operators and overtime in order to continue to do that. So we are expediting it, but again, we expect to have it mid-April back in service.
So a couple questions on that. So
Yeah.
first on Deerhaven Renewable, so it sounds like it was extra cost, extra work, but the plant is still running at the same efficiency or the same productivity and duration as it would have if the bearing hadn't.
Yeah, great question, Chair. In fact, on one of my reliability slides, you'll see where we say generation by fuel type, you'll see for the first quarter of 2023 fiscal year, we had 38% of generation by biomass. And that's a slide, like I said last time I was at UAB, it's a slide we should celebrate. There's not a single utility in the state of Florida that can tell you that they got 38% of their megawatts by renewable. But it's had an up tempo of about 87%. We've recently had a downtrend in natural gas prices, so we're trying to balance economics for our value for our customers, but maintain renewable portfolio, and our suppliers provide wood to us.
No, that's great.
Answer your question?
Yes, it did, thank you. But going back to Deer Haven 1, which is greatly appreciated, keeping that old plant going. And when you say up to 5 years, what happened when you, could it suddenly turbine start shedding parts or what?
Yeah, great question. We do an outage every 18 months. We'll still continue outage every 18 months, but if the engineering analysis, you can't run a turbine to failure. This is not like running a fan or a motor to failure. This is an item that has steam in it. So when you run it to failure, steam gets into people spaces, and we can't do that.
Right.
So we'll use our engineering analysis each outage to verify that the boundaries that we set up under the engineering analysis still allow us to operate to the next outage cycle. So it'll be an every 18 months, and we'll have to spend some capital that we weren't planning to spend, because obviously we're going to extend it 5 years. We were running it to end of life already, so our costs we're going to have to incur. It's not minor either. It's about $2.5 million in capital.
I appreciate it. So what happens if it stops in 2 years?
In terms of, for megawatts,
Yeah, how do we make up the megawatts?
we will have to make it up through either through purchase power agreements to make up that particular areas, use our combustion turbines, which are highly inefficient for that purposes. But mainly, probably what we would do is run a purchase power, coordinate with system control. But we'll continue to monitor and be able to forecast that as early as we possibly can. When it becomes a problem is the summer, right? We have 4 units running in the summer to meet that peak load in the afternoon. So we'll be okay in the shoulder months, but we won't be in the middle of the summer.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
I follow along with our chairman's question. If Deer Haven 1 fails, are we planning on what do we have to do? Replace the whole system, or do we? And whether or not we, I know 5 years, assuming that you could put it in an order, or at least get the components there to get whatever you need to replace that. I don't want any more than a 3-minute answer.
It's short. Chair and board member, so if you recall, we're starting the next integrated resource plan process, the IRP process.
Yeah.
One of the entering arguments in the IRP process is the life expectancy of your units.
Yeah.
So the IRP will be predicated on Deer Haven 1 going away in 2027 at the latest, 2027. So the options that will come out of the IRP will be those options that provide opportunity to replace those megawatts.
Okay.
Just like the last IRP that had to replace Deer Haven 1 that was going away in 2022,
Yes,
but we could not do
looking at
that because of our financial position. But we will be running that in the IRP, knowing those megawatts are going away, and looking at those options. Those options will come to you and to the city commission for us to replace those megawatts. We plan to replace them with generation, not with purchase power.
Okay.
Good. Anyone else? Sir?
Okay? The last item I wanted to talk about real quick is the cold spell that we just recently had. So we had an extended cold spell from the 20th of December to the 28th of December, 9 days. That's very unusual for us to have 9 days of hard freeze. It's also very unusual to do it right in the middle of the holiday period. Because we have a lot of diversity in our fuel, we planned ahead of time to be able to burn solid liquid fuels. Because when you have a cold spell come across the Midwest, coming through Texas and North Carolina, you're expecting gas curtailment. You're expecting natural gas not to be available to you. So we had to be prepared to burn our solid and liquid fuels, coal, and liquid fuels if we had to. I'm happy to report that we had to meet every day and coordinate what happened the night before. We were able to get the gas we needed, but we did have to burn some fuel. You'll see some coal that was burned in December. But we met all of our needs and got through that cold spell. But that's I haven't seen that in the 16 years I've been here, of a 9-day duration of hard freezes. But we were able to get through that. On the reliability factor, there are two things I wanted to talk about. Equivalent availability factor. These are industry best practice terms to measure the reliability of units. So equivalent availability factor, it takes away your planned outages, but it incorporates anything that you have that's unplanned, any extension of an outage, any upset trip, or any forced outage. And you look at your graph, you'll see that the far left-hand side are the targets, and we measure the equipment availability factor on the three largest units, which is Deerhaven 2, Deerhaven Renewable, and combined cycle, Kelly combined cycle. We are on track to meet our targets, and the reason you see some of the dip in Kelly is because Kelly not only had an outage in the fall timeframe, but it had an extended outage. And so that comes across, it decreases your equipment availability factor because that was not planned work. And that's why you see a decrease in the Kelly plant during that period of time. Availability is the next slide, and we do that for all 8 of our units. So you'll see 7 graphs because combined cycle is the combination of CT4 and Unit 8. Availability, you'll see the target on the far left column. That is always going to be 100%. And then you'll see whatever comes out of there, and that's a result of any time the unit is not available. So it's always going to be 100%, where equipment availability factor takes out the planned outages. So your hours you're planning against are less for the equipment availability factor. It's a better measure of your health. And any of those dips you see, you can see Deerhaven 1 has, it was off in October, November, because it was in that extended outage that I talked about for the lifetime assessment. And that's why you'll see a decrease in availability, but we're still on track to meet all our objectives for availability. The next slide was generation by fuel type. So a change from the last time you saw that, you'll see year-to-date in the far left-hand column. You'll see that there's a portion of coal, there's a portion of biomass, there's a portion of natural gas. Again, I'm happy to report the coal is very minimal, but that had happened in December. We had about 38% renewable due to biomass plant and solar that we have, minimum solar we have, and then 50% on natural gas. Again, a slide to be proud of because that means 38% of all the megawatts generated for the first quarter came from renewable energy.
And to that point, it was also, but my understanding, by far the cheapest source of fuel at that point too.
Say again?
That Deerhaven Renewable was by far the cheapest, so we got the cheapest and renewable at the same time.
So through December, the answer would be absolutely correct. Today, that answer would not be correct.
Natural gas is now cheaper than?
Oh, yes, that natural gas for the last probably 10 days has been significantly cheaper.
Oh, really?
But we have to balance running DHR. We have fuel providers. If you turn off fuel providers to DHR, these are multiple providers that have capital investment. So we have reduced the overall megawatts generated by dairy renewable so we can take advantage of the lower natural gas prices. Natural gas prices today were $2.75. And we got as high as $11.40 in the last quarter.
So my understanding is that natural gas prices, like in California, are crazy high right now. Is that?
Yeah, if you listen to any of the experts here, there's nothing fundamentally that's changed in the natural gas market. The only thing that's driving natural gas prices down is weather. Even though you hear about all the weather in the United States, you hear about these localized, the overall United States weather has been mild. The overall European weather has been very mild, which means LNG going overseas has been very mellow. So what you're seeing is 11 BCF of natural gas going back into the reserves every day, over above what's produced. So you have a supply and demand issue. Lots of supply, not as much demand. It doesn't mean that demand can't change for a hot summer. Because like I said, nothing fundamentally has changed in the natural gas market. It is still capitalism at its best. When it's available to go overseas, it'll go overseas.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll share is if you look at our community involvement section, University of Florida has a power club for their engineering department. Mainly it's mechanical and electrical engineers, but any engineering discipline could join that. We have always sponsored that club. That club gets a chance to see power plant operation. Typically, we give them, once a semester, we give them a tour. It's always going to be Deerhaven, so they get a chance to see a turbine in operation and application and how it's used in the generation and how it controls the grid. The pictures you see in your update here show that we had 2 of our engineers, one of them energy delivery, Donnie Thompson, and one of our energy supply engineers, Mitchell Preston, hosted the group and had a really successful orientation. It's a chance for us to proliferate what we do and to help out students that have a power interest.
Thank you.
That's all I have, subject to any questions you may have.
See no light, so I think we're good. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Oh, and next up is Ms. Doherty. She will be giving an update on water wastewater.
So good evening, Chairman and board members. My name is Debbie Doherty. I'm the Water Wastewater Officer Interim. And I just wanted to point some highlights from our report. So they've talked a lot about weather today. The freeze was quite a bit of an issue for our water distribution area, as you would imagine. We had over 100 customer call-outs over the holidays. It, of course, fell over a weekend, too, so that was some intense work for our service operators that were on call. Most of those leaks aren't always in our system, so I don't want you to think that we had a tremendous amount of leaks. A lot of those are customer leaks on their side, and they don't know how to turn their meter off. They want to stop the leak, and they don't know how to turn it off. So a lot of those calls that come in are us going out and helping a customer stop the leak so that their house doesn't continue flooding or whatever the situation is for them. So that was a very intense time for us. The other thing at the bottom of the highlight slide is the SL RAT. So y'all are probably going to hear a lot more about this over the next year. This is a piece of equipment we bought last year. It is a rapid assessment technology for the sewer system. It's a super cool device. It is sound producing from manhole to manhole. And so in the past, we've always used TV cameras to go in and inspect a line. And it's time consuming to set up at a manhole and put a camera down it. This technology allows the guys to go get onto manholes, send the signal. They get number readings off of what that looks like. If there's a blockage, if there's a belly, there's predictions of what that looks like. So we have found some areas where we needed to go do some cleaning and avoid spills. So we've already covered 44 miles of our system in the first quarter of FY23. We didn't CCTV that much of our system ever in a year. So we still are using our CCTV cameras. We're still jetting and cleaning and all the things we do, but we're doing it now in a smarter way, I guess is the best way to say it. We are in the process right now of buying a second unit because it's been so successful. So we're going to put together more information on this program and kind of come back to you guys with more on that. And then, so for the reliability and environmental stewardship sections, I kind of wanted to tie those together for you guys so that when you're looking at the data, you understand there are connections in those two parts of our report in water wastewater. In the reliability section, you're going to see our flows for our treatment plants. We don't have availability factors like the electric system. We have to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You don't turn off the water plant, you don't turn off the wastewater plant. So you're not going to see the same kind of data. But we do put our flows in there. You see our permit capacities, and we do put rainfall in there because the rainfall will affect our flows. So you're always going to see that throughout the year. I did want to point out there's some data on the water distribution system in there about our galvanized steel replacement, our services, and our meters. We are replacing a tremendous amount of water meters, getting ahead of the AMI project. We've already done 2,000 this year, and our goal is to have 17,000 in by July. And that is our crews doing that work and getting ahead of that project. So that's been a significant effort for us. There's data in each of these reports about the galvanized steel main replacements. That is tied to our water leaks. That's proactive replacements to try to get ahead of the leaks that you'll see in our stewardship section. So we always track our leaks each year, and by doing more of this proactive replacement, those leak numbers will come down over time. So just to kind of give you that context. And then the same thing on the wastewater collection system. The more inspection we can do of our system, the more TVing and cleaning and lining of our system, the fewer SSOs you will see in our system. A lot of our SSOs are customer behavior. That's a constant issue for us, but if we can get ahead of any of the ones that are infrastructure related or get ahead of a blockage that's going to occur, that information will help show that. So again, hopefully you'll see the more we do, the less SSOs we have.
When you talk about the freeze, so if GRU staff goes out to a house to shut off the water, is there a charge for that to the customer?
No, not. A lot of times too, our guys are getting pretty creative. They can FaceTime with the customer, and a lot of times we're able to not have to actually go to their house. The guys have gotten really good about if the customer's tech savvy, they'll be like, hey, do you want to FaceTime? I'll tell you how to turn your meter off. So they're doing things like that. But no, we don't charge them for something like that. At the time, too, a lot of times we don't know what the issue is, and we may have gone out and we get there and realize the leak's on their site, not ours, and we just assist them to turn it off.
Okay, great.
And then the last section of the report's community outreach. Water Wastewater loves to get out in the community with the kids, so you'll see a lot of pictures of some of our recent events. We had an event at Caring and Sharing with some of the younger children, and then we have a program with Jacobs Engineering where every semester, in the fall and the spring, We take a batch of middle schoolers out to our treatment plants, and we were at Paynes Prairie in the particular picture in that, in the picture in this report. So we do that each year, and in that particular picture is caring and sharing again in that particular one. So it's a great outreach program for the middle schoolers to get them out and touch the microscopes and see things in real life. So that's great. And then the other pictures from Touch a Truck, that was a really great event for GRU. We touched about 8,000 attendees that were there. All of the city was out there. It was a really great event. A lot of great kids and just a good positive event to share. So that's all I have. You have any questions?
When Sweetwater was first put in, GRU was very deeply involved with that, as you know. And a lot of us read in the newspaper about the enhancements that are going in Sweetwater right now. Is GRU still involved with that, or is that totally separate now?
So we maintain the wetland portion, the treatment portion of the wetland, but a lot of the other things, it's the Parks Department or the City Public Works Department is responsible for that.
So when we read about these enhancements, that's really not GRU
No.
actively involved with that part of it?
No, like for instance, there was a story today I saw where Wild Spaces Public Places bought a electric tram to drive people on the paths. So no, that's not us. That's their money, just enhancing the park. So it's a partnership. We have an MOU with the city and the Parks Department, and we all have our responsibilities for what we're on the hook for money.
All right,
Any other questions?
thank you.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair, I do want to take just a quick opportunity. GRU is often in the news and people talk about it. I'm sure you all get phone calls and there's challenges that we face, and those are very real challenges. I did want to take just a brief opportunity because I think our folks from our leadership team touched on several things. The employees at GRU have just done an amazing job of various things that were highlighted today. When a freeze like that 9 days of hard freeze, we all think, oh man, it was cold, we had to wear jackets, we had to turn our heat on. Staff is working around the clock during those times to make sure that we still had power. Dino's calling me and, hey, are we, I think we're gonna make it, and this is what we're doing to mitigate it and everything, and we have staff working at the plants. As Debbie referenced, there are staff that, they're putting their jackets on and they're going out in the middle of the night as things are freezing and people don't have the water service because they have a leak that's really on their side of the thing. We're out there in the community doing that. The billing folks have worked since before Christmas, kind of nonstop, working, a lot of hours to really be responsive to our customers. And so I just want to highlight from a employee standpoint how important our employees take serving the customers and what they put in and the care and effort that they do, and with amazing results most of the time. There are very real challenges, and I don't want to underscore those, that they are real, and I understand the impact of customers, but most of the time we're providing just a high level of quality of service, a high level of quality of electricity, water, wastewater service, natural gas, telecommunications, our billing folks, all of those things are at a very high level most of the time, and our employees take that very seriously. So I want to highlight that. Mr. Carroll was talking about our line workers. They received a Restoring Communities Award in 2022 for really helping other communities and mutual aid. Just like we get mutual aid, they go and do mutual aid, and they were recognized through FMEA, an industry group, for doing that. I think it's hard, being in this job for a year. It's often hard because there's a lot of challenging things, and that seems to be the focus. But most of the time, our employees are just doing a phenomenal job providing those services. So, thank you for indulging me.
And I appreciate you saying, and really, we do appreciate what all you guys do. I have a special empathy for Kenzon. I've dealt with shortages. I've dealt with angry customers. You're working your butt off, trying to do the best you can as people are yelling at you to say, why can't you do more? So that's tough. And I do feel for you and appreciate what you guys, all of you, are doing. So thank you. All right. Is anyone going to talk safety?
It's in the report. We don't have anybody specifically to talk, but if you have any questions, all the folks are here that can answer those questions.
I have one just on that part. On page 37, the employee injuries Q1 graph there, I wasn't very clear on that. Like, it's got the wastewater, water, and energy delivery, both bars going out, 4, but the colors aren't really clear to me and what that means, basically.
So,
See, if you read the narrative below that, it's got an actual, like, 1, 2, 3, 4 total injuries that are discussed in Q1, but it doesn't make any sense to me in terms of, like, that graph.
yes, so I agree with you.
Okay.
We're Gator country, everything's orange.
I know.
It's just orange and blue. So we've had 4 total, so I think it's 2 in water, wastewater, and 2 in energy delivery.
Okay.
As best I can tell, I don't know if you all can.
But yeah, the graph makes it look like there's 4 of each.
Right.
Yeah, so I think the graph is inaccurate. We'll make sure we clean that up.
I was wondering why the x-axis has half people increments.
Half an injury.
Half injury increments. All good questions.
And then I have one question that we haven't talked about that isn't anywhere in here, if that's okay. So I haven't seen anything in this quarterly update, or I believe in the last one, about where we're at with the solar project.
Yes.
And I wondered if we could get a quick update on that, because I've been hearing things.
Believe it or not, that was the next thing we were going to transition into.
Okay.
So we did not talk, but that was a perfect segue.
Okay, all right.
Member, so Eric Walters is here to give that brief update.
So this is a non-agenda.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's a
yeah.
non-voting.
Correct.
And
Eric wanted to just. It's a timely issue, so Eric will give an update and we can discuss.
So, and before you do that, so this is one of these things that the city commission needs to vote on next week. They didn't have time to get it on our agenda in time for us to vote on it, so we won't be able to vote on it. It just didn't happen that way, unfortunately. So if anybody on the UAB wishes to voice an opinion on it, I'd encourage you to contact your city commissioner, contact the mayor, show up at the meeting. That's where you can have your voice.
Absolutely. Chair, members, Eric Walters, Interim Chief Sustainability Officer for GRU. And we wanted to give you a brief update on where we are with Origis and what we're calling the Solar Bluff solar site or the solar project. But I wanted to give you kind of a project history because it's important to know why we're here, right? Going back to the beginning, the City Commission approved Origis as a successful solar provider back in July of 2020. So through that process, what they approved was basically 50 megawatts of output from that facility. They approved a small battery to help with ramp rate, to slow down how fast the solar ramps in and out of our system. And they also had some sustainability items that were in that approval. So things like goats instead of lawnmowers, pollinator-friendly grasses, those kind of things, educational areas for local schools to come out and learn, right? So those things were all there. But through that contract, Origis had all the responsibility to site the project. Going through the siting project beginning in 2021, the county commission ultimately rejected that siting because of concerns from the neighbors around that site. What happened after that was continued conversations with those neighbors. What Origis did was basically come to an agreement with them to say, we're going to back away from that original site. They laid out some criteria for a new site. And this new site that they're proposing meets all the criteria for those neighbors, right? So while all that was going on, though, of course, the world didn't stop. The world kept going, and things like inflation and supply chain issues became everyday terms. And so as a result, the price kind of went up from there. Raw materials, labor costs, construction costs, all those things elevated, along with gas and eggs. I bought eggs the other day, it's ridiculous. All those things went up in price. And so what happened is Origis had to come back to us and say, hey, if we want this contract to go forward, then we're going to need a price increase for that. So when we did that, we had really three options. We could either start all over again. We could look at building it ourselves with the new things in the IRA and so forth, or we could continue on with this PPA, negotiate a new price, negotiate some other things in it. So when we did the evaluation of all three of those items, basically what happened is we came to the conclusion that negotiating those new terms was going to be the best option for us. It reduced risk, price risk, construction risk, and also schedule risk. Some of the things that we negotiated with that were also an increased output from that facility. So 50% more solar energy, so going from 50 megawatts to 74.9. So that's a 50% increase and getting us a larger step towards our renewable goal. Another portion that was negotiated was allowing us to do something different with that battery. So instead of just controlling ramp rate and how fast solar ramps in and out, they also, we were able to negotiate allowing that battery to do some energy shifting. So whatever is left over from that ramping, we can then use at a time when energy prices are higher or more expensive to kind of offset that. So those were a few of the contract negotiations that came out of that discussion. So really where we are now is, as the general manager said, going to the city commission for approval of this new amendment to the contract with an increased output, with battery shifting, with some more value brought to our customer. Assuming that amendment is approved, looking forward, what we'll see is basically breaking ground sometime in the March 2024 timeframe, with commercial operation and actually receiving power on or before December 31st of 2024. So, that's kind of where we are right now leading up to the meeting next week, the City Commission.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
Yes, please.
I've got a question. Before, when we discussed, the placement, location for the plant that didn't go through, the geographical location was very important in the discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any maps or anything to show us where the new location is vis-a-vis the old location and so forth?
I did not bring a map with me, but I can describe to you where it is. So the original site was in the Archer area. This new site is about 1.5 miles south of that site. Okay, so same landowner basically, but this site has all the provisions that the neighbor said will allow it to go through, or we want to oppose it to go through in this area. So. But I did not. I apologize. I didn't bring a map with me to show.
And Mr. Chair, can I jump in for a second? So I just want to make sure we've been working with Origis, trying to work toward a new agreement going forward. As we kind of landed that discussion, one of the things we were trying to retain was the ability for them to have the deadline of the end of the year, next year, December 31st of 2024, as the deadline for putting the project in and bringing it online. To do that, they needed to start permitting right away. And so because of that, we wanted to go to the city commission next week to get that approval so they can meet all those criteria in the deadline. Our intent is to bring more information back to you at the next workshop, where we'll show you, we can show maps, because we've now put together a presentation that has some of that information in there, that we can bring that back to you with more detail at the next workshop.
And when you do that, if you can show some of the demography, that was the issue before, of course, was the distance to homes and residential structures and roads and schools and so forth. So if you could add the demographic issues, that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, we can show setbacks are significantly more, things like that. I think Eric can correct me, but I think there's no home within 2,000 feet of the site, whereas before it was hundreds of feet or maybe even only 100.
I'd like to hear more about the goats and how that's supposed to work. But
They just cut the grass.
Yeah.
They're taking care of the grass. They're not generating any power.
John, you were.
That was part of the question I have. I understand the generation of power, the battery, is that provisioned by the vendor also?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're having a contract on that, you have a piece of its generation, a piece of it is storage,
Correct.
and you have, once it's paid for generation, it's yours to use. So if it's in storage, it's under your control?
So the contract basically says that we receive all of the power that's there. Part of the restrictions is how fast that power can change or the rate of change of that power. So the contractor is responsible for owning and operating while we're under the PPA. So they control the battery, they optimize it to meet that standard to deliver to us.
So we tell them how much we want, and they provision it?
Well, we accept everything that's coming out of the facility. And so as that facility ramps up during the morning, let's say, obviously that ramp is a lot higher than we can accept.
Than what we need.
So the additional power gets stored in that battery, right? And so they're in control of the battery, and then they smooth out that the output from
But we
the
have to
facility.
give them some sort of a curve, right?
They're giving us actually a 15-minute estimate of how much the output will be. We'll take whatever is being produced.
Okay.
I was just,
You good, John? Sorry. Go ahead.
this is, how big a site is this, site for
So
panels?
it's roughly, chair members, is roughly 400 acres, the size of the site, and that's to accommodate the setbacks, all of the panels, and so forth.
Okay.
Encompassing that 400-acre site.
You good?
Okay.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, I have a couple things. One, I just want to say I'm excited that this is moving forward, and I totally trust you guys to make good decisions and move this forward. I am a little bit disappointed, though, considering the interest that this body has expressed in this project and asked about it multiple times over the past year, and really have not gotten anything more than the sort of like stock language that has been in a couple of the operational updates. And now to hear tonight that, oh, well, you know, we had these 3 different roads we could have gone down and we considered it, and now we've made this decision and we're moving forward it so quickly that we didn't even have time to bring it to the UAB. It's just going directly to the City Commission for a vote. It would have been nice to me for us to have like just been involved in that conversation, or at least heard a little bit more about your deliberations along the way. So that's one thing. I just would like to say that. And the second thing is a question. Since this is a PPA, we're essentially paying for unit of energy produced, right? Like that's kind of how the contract works?
Correct.
So when you say that the price has gone up, can we get like just a percentage, like per unit of energy produced? Has that price gone up 10%, 50%? Like, do we know that?
So the price is a trade secret. So even in the contract, it's redacted. So like in the contract that we'll put in the backup with the city commission, that's a redacted amount. In general, we can say it's less than the average cost of power. Is that the right way to?
Right. So it did increase. It's less than our average cost of power to serve our load. But it did increase from the original price that they gave us. So unfortunately, they did redact that as trade secret, so we can't share that in the public.
Okay. So compared to our overall energy mix and what we're paying now, it still looks like a good deal, but just not as good as it was when we initially talked about it. Is that
Correct.
That's correct.
And I guess, Mr. Chair, I'll add a couple of things. So part of the vetting was looking at the market. Eric said some of these things, but going out to the market and saying, okay, if we went out to the market now and did an RFP and did what are the prices like? And we work with our financial advisor, the energy authority, as well as our internal folks to kind of look at what's out in the market. And again, this was a very competitive on the low end. or lower than what was out on the market if we went back out there. And then we also looked at it in terms of using the Inflation Reduction Act, and let's say we were going to build it ourselves, and we took advantage of those grants. And again, this is very competitive to that. So those were things that led us along the way to this point, and part of the discussions back and forth with Origis as we were working toward this point.
Would one of you like to address Jason's concerns that, and I share?
Yeah.
Other times it does feel like GRU goes off and suddenly it's a surprise that we are.
Yeah, so ideally, as you know, as we're working through the options, it's a difficult process because we're in a back and forth negotiation. So well, let me step back and just say, most of the year we weren't doing anything. Origis was working with the neighbors. Origis was looking at another site. They were working on all of that, and contractually that was their responsibility. So most of the year that wasn't the case. This is very recent where they're bringing these things to us, and one of the aspects was that end date of the project. Like, we want to get the project in. We don't want that date to keep pushing out. And so as we were talking through what those options are and we were vetting some of those things, that's become a part of the issue and part of what's accelerated our timeline. The other part is just that the factors that have changed, several of the factors that have changed are all redacted trade secret type of information. So there's not a whole lot to share with the UAB in terms of what the price went to and from. And so I agree with you. It is frustrating to me whenever we do the timing thing, but it's part of the challenge. You know, getting agenda items in and all of that. It backs things up 5-6 weeks, and it's difficult when you're trying to meet a schedule to do that. So that is not our intent. We always strive to do it where we're bringing things to the UAB, but there are times like this when that doesn't quite work out.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Hey, Fletcher.
I have a
can't see you down there.
very short seat here. I got two questions. You said a 50% increase. Does that mean going from 50 megawatts to 75 megawatts?
50 megawatts to 74.9 megawatts, just under 75.
I call that 75. Okay. But number two, I could be wrong, but I thought the gating factor in all this was the county commission, not the city commission. Could you square us away with the role of the county commission in all this?
So on the original process, the county commission, and this was stepping back in the timeline, right? July of, I believe, 2021, a new law went into effect that basically the special use permit for solar did not have to go through county approval. If it was designated as agriculture and someone wanted to put solar on it, they could basically skip that first step. This application for that site went in just before that law went into effect. And so the county commission had the right and had to approve the special use permit for this project. And so that is where the county came in. They had to approve the special use permit. With this new site, with that law being in effect, that special use permit up front is no longer required. So you can now go directly into the permitting process, submitting your design drawings and so forth with the county. And so that's really where this process is coming in at this point. So that first step that the county disproved the last time is basically, we've skipped over that and gone directly to the second and third steps.
So, and just to clarify, I mean, I'm repeating some of what Eric said. So our city commission needs to approve the change in the contractual terms. Mm-hmm. The county commission now doesn't need to do a special use permit, but they still need to do a site construction permit. So that's the permit that they'll be going through. Anytime you construct something in the county, you got to get permit through the county commission. And so that's the problem.
That wasn't the stumbling block the first time.
Correct.
So,
The piece that was a stumbling block the first time is no longer an issue because they're on a new site.
Great. Not surprised. I have a couple questions, not an exhaustive list. Yeah, it would have been interesting to be involved. I just with the Inflation Reduction Act, just to see where the numbers came out, because I'm still figuring that stuff out, quite honestly, on a daily basis. Yeah, and I assume you guys have done this, but there were substantial benefits, increased benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, potentially up to 50-60% tax credits. So hopefully you guys have identified those and make sure,
Yeah. So we did kind of two independent analysis with that, recognizing that the IRA was now a new factor and opened up some new options for us. So we had PFM, which does consulting for our financial, for the CFO and BFA. We had them take an independent look based on what's available in the IRA of the site and the pricing and comparing that to the PPA. We did basically our own pro forma. So if we wanted to go out and build this project, we put together, well, how much would it cost to lease the land? What materials would we need? What labor and construction costs would we need? And when we went through those two independent analysis, PFM went off and did theirs, we went off and did ours. When we came back and compared the IRA benefits to the PPA cost, it was basically a wash. There was no significant difference in cost over that 20-year period going and self-building versus having the PPA. But if we did go to the self-building route, what it did was introduce a whole lot of risk for us. So we would take on a lot of additional risk, including schedule risk. We don't believe we would be able to make that 2024 date. So we take on a lot of risk for virtually no financial benefit.
No, and unfortunately, some people have a bad memory of PPAs as related to the biomass plant. I think it's exactly the right. My question was more just whether it was worth going back to the market. Just because there are things that have gone up, things that have gone down. But
right.
I'm not saying you guys haven't done your job. I'm just
right.
asking.
Yeah, when we looked at going back to the market, we saw, and what we saw coming through for new projects is basically a higher price.
Okay.
Eric, can you talk too about if there are other savings that Origis achieves?
Yeah. So as we go through, and again, like you said, everyone is kind of figuring out what all is in the IRA and some additional credits that may be available. One of the other things negotiated was that if Origis does get an additional tax break or a tax benefit, they've agreed to share that with us 50-50. Okay. So they keep half of the benefit and we keep half of the benefit as far as pricing goes. Great. And so that's an incentive to find additional breaks and reductions in cost, but it also is a good thing financially to share that.
Yeah, that's great, because one of the benefits is, or potential benefits, is if you buy Made in America panels, which could cost more, and so I think that's a great approach. On the battery, can you talk about the size of the battery, the capacity of the battery in megawatt hours?
I'm not sure. I don't think I can.
So. Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think I can.
And also for the sake of the other UAB members, my understanding is the city commissioners see the unredacted values.
They have seen the unredacted values.
We can't.
Individually, but not in the backup,
Okay.
and not in the public, yeah. Okay. And that's not something that's allowed to be shared as part of it.
Speaking of the battery, I thought that was very interesting that GRU will have some ability to make use of that battery for our benefit. Mm-hmm. Are there cycling limits? Are there, how detailed is the contract on that?
So all of those things were kind of worked out in the preliminary before it went into the contract. The contract really spells out what the battery is for, right? All the cycling, all the analysis, and all that was done pre-contract. And so all of that analysis was done beforehand, and none of that is included in the contract. With the energy shifting, the analysis that was done, though, we can say there's no significant impact to the life of the battery, even with the additional energy shifting. And so we don't see any additional wear and tear on that battery in the cycling because of that.
Do they limit, I guess my question is, do they limit the number of cycles if we say, we'd like to cycle 3 times a day because it's to GRU's benefit to do some time of use, land management?
Correct. We chair members, we told them what we wanted out of the battery, and then they went back and modeled the equivalent amount of cycles that would achieve that. So in other words, we told them we wanted ramp rate control and we wanted to be able to energy shift, and they went back and equated that to a number of cycles and translated that into battery life.
Okay. And then the final one is related to net metered solar. I know we've been hit with GRU more and more saying these lines have reached capacity, these lines have reached capacity, can't do that. With the increase in the system size, are we going to start hitting the point where GRU is going to start needing to limit additional solar coming online because of, the lack of ability to absorb that much solar going on and offline at the same time?
That's a great question. So the limit on the circuits is really attached to the distribution system.
Sure.
And so those limits won't be affected by the addition of this solar site. This solar site will attach directly to our transmission system. Because there is a battery associated that dampens the ramp rate and the output, we can't accept that into our system at this point. However, you are correct, because of NERC requirements, because of regulations, because of the need to balance our system, any additional solar will have to come with some kind of firming power to go along with that because of the intermittency. So as we move forward, there's some ratio of solar to firming power that will have to go in addition to this site.
So in other words, if correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, if we were going to do another utility scale solar project, then we would need that.
Correct.
But how close on the, for customer net metered systems, if someone says, oh,
I think it depends on the circuit, right? That would be a circuit.
I mean, outside of the circuit limits, I'm talking about just an overall grid impacting.
Correct.
delivery systems.
So again, the circuit and the net metering, completely separate
Completely
issue from
separate.
this one.
Agreed.
So the addition of this site won't affect that at all because it's going on the transmission side. Overall system stability, that 74.9 megawatts, we'll round up to 75. That 75 megawatts is basically our limit without additional firming power. So to deal with that intermittency, if we add any additional megawatts of solar beyond that, then that firming capacity is required. That was done by an ACE study, so area control error. When we look at area control error, that is basically our load matched with our generation. It's a subtraction of the two, and the goal is 0. Once you add more than 75 megawatts of power, that ACE now becomes out of the control limit. And so we have to do something to bring it back in control limits. We're no longer be able to balance our ACE at that point beyond the 75 megawatts. So that's where that limit comes from.
Okay.
Took a limit of the resiliency of the system, looking at the volatility, looking at the intermittency of the solar, looking at our control constraints that are dictated by NERC, and said, where's our limit of adding solar? Our current system configuration, that limit was about 80 megawatts. So once we add this solar site, anything additional now puts us beyond that control limit that we can do based on NERC. And so additional firming power would have to be coupled with that solar to make sure that we stay in regulation.
So did you know typically how much net metered solar did you add last year, for example?
I believe our total solar output is 32 megawatts, 36 megawatts, somewhere in there, and I believe 18 of that is solar fit. I can't tell you, and Tony may be able to speak to it, but I can't tell you how much net metering was added in the last year. I'll have to get you that answer.
Eric, you stepped right into this. Would you take some time at some point and instruct us on how you calculate the area control error?
Sure. So Chair, Commissioners, a really quick overview of that is really, it's your load, your system load, minus your generation, plus your interchange. So you're adding those two together. And plus there's a frequency bias factor there. So if your frequency is high or low.
That's the one I wanted to get at.
Correct. So if your frequency is high or low, it amplifies your impact to the ACE. So if you're running more load, more generation than you have load, your frequency tends to be higher and vice versa. So as that solar swings, that frequency bias gets larger and larger or smaller and smaller. And so as you multiply that formula together, those huge swings turn into huge differences in your ACE.
Okay.
Chair and members, thank you for the question. And coincidentally, we were just texting about this. I just found out from one of my team members that in the last 5 weeks, we have added 1.5 megawatts of net metering solar PV on GRU's distribution system. And that's unprecedented because, if memory serves me correctly, I believe we've been in the solar PV customer-owned net metering market for about 10 or 11 years. Is that accurate?
No, more than that, but yeah.
Well, during that time, we added about 32 megawatts.
Right.
So we're, at this pace,
Yeah.
we'll add 15 megawatts in this calendar year.
So, thank you for that answer. So, based on that answer, if we're trying to add 15 megawatts next year, once this has come online, what happens? Is it, are you going to have to say, no, you can't do that, or no, you're going to have to add batteries or capacitors? What happens to net metering after if we increase to 75 megs?
Sure. So, Chair, members, the total was built on total output of the system for solar. So when we did that that analysis, it was back in 2019 or 2018 actually. And so with that analysis, we calculated in all of our utility scale solar and some of the fit solar that was there. And so that number was smaller, right? As we go forward and we add that 75 megawatts, what's likely going to happen is we're going to have to redo that A study to get a better understanding of where we are with the new fit. We know that general limit is about 80 megawatts. As we push up against that, it doesn't mean that we hit 80 and all of a sudden the system goes crazy, right? Sure. It's not a precipice that we drop off of. But the further we get past 80 megawatts, the more and more intermittency is introduced to the system, and then the more and more we have to mitigate that, right? So that 80 megawatts was a limit based on the study and the inputs at that time. As we approach that limit, we're going to have to redo the study, and we're going to have to figure out, well, how much firming power are we going to have to add, and how much are we going to need to offset the anticipated rooftop solar. Part of the discussion that we're doing now as part of the IRP is really projecting how much rooftop solar we expect in our system. Growth rate and EV growth rate, all of those things are things that we're coming up with projections for to include in our load forecast. So we think we know, right? We're taking projections of folks in the market of what their analysis is. But you're right, it's going to reach a critical mass that, yes, we're going to have to do something about that. And there may be either a limit, or we may have to ask for additional firming capacity or redo how we operate our system until we can do the full implementation of the IRP and also respond to those additional solar inputs.
Okay, yeah. For me personally, this is a big deal. What I'm hearing is this, likely as soon as this goes online, something's going to happen. Based on 15 megawatts this year, and it's just growing. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how to be comfortable with what I'm hearing, or how to, or whether to say, hey, this is a significant issue, right, to increase from the 50 to 75 megs, pushing us right up to the limit.
This moves from a distribution issue into a system. We call it issue.
So when you talk about, I'm sorry, you were saying farming, we have to do some kind of a, what kind of adjustment would you have to do?
So firming power.
Firming power?
Firming power. So quick start generation. That's either going to be batteries that we can instantly deploy. It's going to be something like rice, where we can start up quickly to offset the intermittency. Something in that realm that has to be quick start, that can ramp quickly, and that can respond to those quick changes in solar.
And who would pay for that?
We would pay for that.
You would pay for that?
The utility would have to balance the system and include that in any generation sources that we build.
Okay. And then I just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with that answer, because that's a big deal.
It is.
Because I could imagine the utilities, not pointing at GRU, saying, nope, that's the developer's problem. Or...
Well, when we're looking at system reliability, that's the balancing authority's issue, right? So we have to factor that in to whatever generation that we build. We can't ignore it. It has to be factored in.
So is there something that would prevent people outside of capacity, you know, because that also falls with this, you know, circuit capacity. GRU could do things that would increase the circuit capacity that GRU is not currently doing. So why is this different? I'm just trying to understand.
So we are looking at this from a total system standpoint, and we're not delving down into the distribution system on each circuit.
Sure.
And so we look at it from a total system standpoint. So that's the perspective that we're coming from. If we're going to reach our net zero goal, there's going to be a significant amount of solar that has to go with that. We've got solar and we've got biomass as options. So with that significant increase, we have to add a portion of that of firming power to make sure that we can meet our regulatory requirements. So that is just a part of our modeling. We know that has to happen, so we are including that in our modeling.
Okay. So again, to repeat, just make sure we're 100%. So there's nothing in here that's going to prevent people from putting net metering in GRU in the future.
I can't speak to chair members. I can't speak to that. There won't be a hiatus, or I can't promise you that, you know, until we get something online, we will slow down that process, right? That's the main reason why the limits on each circuit are put in, simply because each circuit is designed, you know, for a certain amount of flux and transition and so forth. So as we go out and reach that limit, we may have to do something differently. I'm not saying that happens day one. I'm not saying that happens 6 months after it goes in. But there will come a point in time where we have to respond to the uncertainty on the system and put something in to remove that uncertainty and that intermittency from the system.
And that could be either ramp up fast or curtail, right?
Correct.
Curtail what's coming in from the solar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think I remember it might have been the last IRP, the way it was kind of talked about then was we were talking about these RICE units as almost like solar enablers. Like there was even some ratio that you guys had presented where for every X number of megawatts of rice production, it would allow this much solar to be produced. Am I remembering that correctly?
Chair members, you are remembering that correctly. We think that is somewhere between, for every 10 megawatts, or every 5 megawatts, somewhere between 1 and 2 megawatts per that. It's either half or a quarter, right? So if I put in, it's somewhere between that ratio. You can fine tune that a little bit. And a new ACE study will help us fine tune that. So it's either every 2 megawatts of solar is 1 megawatt of firming, or every 4 megawatts of solar is 1 megawatt of firming. So there is a ratio that we've used in the past to do that.
And again, with the important caveat that we're going to be watching what is happening in the storage technology as well, because that also, as you just said, could be considered firming.
Absolutely.
So, I just had one last quick question here. Could you just remind us of what the life cycle is of this PPA, the lifetime of the agreement? How
Sure.
long is that?
So, chair members, the initial contract is 20 years. It is a flat fee or fixed fee for that entire 20-year period. There is the option to renew, I believe, for 2 5-year increments beyond that 20 years. But that's at both parties' discretion. We both have to agree to that extension.
Thank you.
What happens to the equipment at the end of that agreement?
We have the option to purchase it at that time.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this topic?
Pretty clear.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I would just note that when we had this exact same discussion for the last IRP, the cost per megawatt hour of power coming from batteries was much higher. It's dropped very, very sharply in this is a very short time.
So, chair members, that's one of the things that we are updating our information on is most recent battery power cost. And so we'll have the most up-to-date battery cost in the IRP once we kick that off. So that was a point that we inputted last time, and we're updating that input point.
All right. Yeah, don't want to drag this out, but you know, honestly, I'm as you can tell, when you say things like hiatus, that means, oh, some people may go out of business, kind of high, you know, that's
So, Chair members, I'm not saying that there will be a hiatus, and I'm not saying that there's a defined time frame for that.
No, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
But there is a point where if we don't add more firming power, we can't add any more solar because it puts us at regulatory risk and it puts us at a reliability risk. So how that translates into our processes and procedures yet to be determined. But that initial study said that there is a limit with our current configuration. As our configuration changes, then that limit may change. But again, when you're dealing with intermittency, when you're dealing with solar panels that ramp up and down, that can go away at any second, we can't live with that intermittency. We have to do something to firm it.
Appreciate it. I'm just trying to get comfortable with this so that I'm not put in a position of going to the commission and saying, don't go to 75. I mean, I'm asking if you have anything that you can offer to assure me that that's not the right choice for me to do. Okay.
I'll say that if we want to meet our 2045 goal, solar is going to play a part in it.
Sure.
It's solar and biomass. Those are our only two options, really.
Understood.
So we can delay our 2045 goal, or we can make progress towards it. So those are our two options.
Good. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Policy.
It's a tough one, huh?
Bet it is.
It's, you know,
Thanks,
Good.
Eric. Appreciate it.
thank you. All right. So now moving right along to the PSA with Claritus Treasury Solutions item.
Yes, so Mr. Michael Dibovic is from our Budget, Finance, and Accounting Department is going to just give an update on what this is and what we're asking for approval.
Good evening. I'm Michael Dibovic. As Mr. Cunningham said, I'm with the Budget, Finance, and Accounting Group. Claritus, and especially the principles of Claritus, they offer a unique combination of expertise in our software, the Treasury management specialty, and they helped build the system we have. So occasionally we call on them over the last few years to remind us how we set things up and to help us through difficult system changes. We had small agreements with them here and there, nothing that needed to come before the commission. Looking forward in the next 6 to 18 months, we have 3 major projects that are going to require Treasury management potential changes, a potential banking RFP, our conversion and update of our customer billing services, and also some new finance product types, which I don't understand, so I won't address them, but they're written down here. And so I felt it was probably a good idea, instead of doing this paperwork over and over again, to look forward and estimate about how much we would use of this consultant's time the next few years and put together a comprehensive package, which adds up to $150,000 over 3 years, hence it's on your agenda. Other than that, I'll stand ready for questions.
Any questions on this one?
Is this 150,000, it's total fees, you know?
It's a time, we're only charged for the hours we use, and this is a max. This would be a
Okay.
cap.
Okay.
So, if we,
I'm used to other types of contracts and all that stuff. That's all.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ready? So this is a recommendation, so at this time I would accept a motion.
Make a motion, the recommendation listed in the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the board? Discussion from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. Then, next, we have the discussion of staff review of the UAB draft energy policy.
So, Mr. Chair, Eric Walters is going to come back up. We had talked in the late last year about the draft. Excuse me. Sorry about that. About the draft energy policy that some of you had worked on previously, and a way to approach it that creates a more useful document that we're utilizing as staff, and you're providing direction through that, and that we can even work with the city commission of what they have laid out for that. And so Eric and his area have been trying to work through ways to approach that, and I think he's going to lay out today a recommendation of a way we can move forward with that is really focused on specifically what the ordinance lays out that this energy policy should include. So with that, Eric, I'll let you go.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I feel like that got loud really quick.
Just one question. Was this developed by the utility board?
Yes, the UAB developed.
How many of the people that are here today actually did this?
I came in on the tail end of it, helped craft a few of the policies.
And you're the only one?
Well, I was
And you were there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
Because
taken a
one of
while.
the questions I had is, how did they come up with the 2045? Yes. Okay. What was the discussion that led to a date certain?
Oh, well, that was the city commission said 2045.
Oh, okay.
City commission said 100% renewable by 2045, long before we got involved in the policy.
I'd like to make a comment. I made this comment before. The APPA has 2050 as a goal, and my concern is trying to line those two numbers up. Because the APPA is a national organization. They'll be pushing for a 2050 goal, and we might be holding.
My issue here is, I have no problem with goals.
Yeah.
Okay, you put a goal out,
Yeah.
but then you devolve that into a policy, and things start to get locked in on a policy, because then you start talking about budgets, you start talking about what can be done within a period of time. Things really start to roll once it becomes a policy. So my question really is how much thought went into the risk, cost, stability of the system, and everything else relative to just picking a 2045 and saying that's what we're going to do. And I don't care what some of these government bodies put out there for 2035, 2045, 2050.
Yeah,
I mean, those are all coming from some scientists, to look out at their regression analysis and say things are going to get bad by this time.
Yeah.
Because they're not trying to run or trying to manage a power system, so.
And I'll be very interested, we've had a lot of discussion even before we got started, because we did a lot of work on it, but quite honestly, I felt like, a policy isn't a plan. It's not, that there's more specifics that the UAB developed that got into it that were not policy. They were implementation.
I hear you, but when you say a policy, every decision start to be made, which will become to plans, projects, and everything else. Because somebody will say it rolls right back to, but the policy is this. Okay, so that's what I'm worried about.
Okay. Eric, if you can enlighten us.
Okay.
You have a solution to it all on that side.
I hope so. So chair members, again, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer for GRU. And I love the discussion, because those are a lot of the discussions that we had when my team sat down to say, well, how do we approach this? How do we look at this policy? And I really want to say up front that we're bringing to this as an option, as a proposal, and really inviting a discussion on how we handle this. So let's just jump right into it. A little bit of background. We started the initial energy policy was drafted back in 2019 by, I guess, 2 members of this board and other folks that were on the board at this time. And was given to the utility basically for review and feedback of that policy. The UAB, from what I understand, was asked to go out and receive community feedback on that initial plan, which happened in a couple of ways. There were a few surveys that were sent out to customers. And also we did a couple of in-person outreaches, GRU in the neighborhood, and really presented the highlights of the plan and tried to get feedback from the customers and citizens in that way. And so that happened really mid, early COVID, right? And so some time has passed, and then last fall, in October, the board basically got together and discussed the previous plan, what was in it, and really expressed a desire to have a more collaborative approach to it. The previous plan, if I'm being honest, was really crafted and then handed over and said, hey, what do you think? When we discussed this going forward, the idea came out of that meeting that it really does work when we sit down together and try to come up with something that makes sense. Because you're right, when you put a policy in place, you start things rolling, you start things in motion, you now start making decisions and budgets and so forth. And I'll get into a little later, but what we really want to do is create something that we can both work with, right? That actually informs decisions. And so when we looked at that, the request was made that staff recommend a method to revise this policy. So thinking about, do we do that section by section? Do we do it, high level concept and kind of drill down? How do we do that? So when we set out to do that, we really had to look at two things. One was intent, and then the other was in use. In some cases, the intent and the in use are the same. I don't believe that's the case in this policy situation. I believe the intent, going back to why the policy was put in place or asked to be drafted, what we did was we kind of went back to the original language when the UAB was formed and said, well, what does this utility policy look like? What was the original intent of that utility policy? And really the intent was to set direction, provide guidelines and principles, not necessarily steps, procedures, plans, and implementation, right? So I believe the intent was really to set the direction. And when we think about the end use, we want a policy at the end of the day that influences decision, right? It's something that is a guideline that you use to approach the business and how we make decisions day to day. Something that's adoptable. So when we thought about this, we thought about not only, okay, what is the purpose, but also what is the end result of that? And ideally, I think what we're after is a policy that provides direction, helps to make decision on how we're moving forward as a utility, but also something that we can adopt, either coming into and making an admin guideline that we can refer to. It's a reference as we do our daily business to say, well, what are we supposed to be doing by our energy policy that we agreed to? And so that's really the lens and the framework that we took a look at. So again, to inform the intent, we went back to the original UAB ordinance and pulled some of that language. And the end use is, again, a reference, something that sets direction, not necessarily the details. With the end use, it's also very important to not only think about the reference, but also think about the span of control, right? Homelessness, unhoused people, affordable housing is an important issue, but a utility policy is not necessarily the direct way to handle that. It's not the best way to handle that because we have virtually zero control over those items, zero influence, right? So putting that into an energy policy just puts something out there that I can't affect, right? So the idea is, well, how do we use it as a reference that influences and sets direction? How do we make something that's within our span of control that we can actually affect? And at the end result, make it a policy that we can adopt and operate from. So when we went back and looked at the original language, we really pulled that language almost verbatim and kind of translated it here. Now, as we go through this is meant to be a rough outline, right? Again, discussion points of what we're proposing. So when you look at this language, looking at the purpose, GRU should evaluate energy and utility issues based on a triple bottom line approach, of equity, economy, and environment. GRU shall focus its efforts on, number one, delivering safe power, cost-effective, reliable, environmentally responsible, and enhances quality of life in our community. Second part is planning and implementing solutions to meet the energy needs of the community in a manner that is environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable. The third is progressing the city towards that 2045 net zero greenhouse goal. And the fourth is promoting initiatives of energy affordability, renewable energy, environmental stewardship, and energy equity. Now, when you look at the original language, and I brought a copy, but I realized I didn't include that slide in it when I sent it to you, Robin. So I'm not sure we can have the overhead.
Should, just set it down there.
He's back there? Okay, great. So just as a reference, when we looked at that, I'm not sure if you can zoom in on here, in this area right here. That's a little weird. So this is actually the language from the UAB ordinance when it was created. And when you look at the utility policy, again, taking some of the language that I just read to you directly from this language, develop and recommend utility policy and considering and by adoption from the City Commission, evaluate energy and utility issues based on a triple bottom line approach, equity, economy, and environment. Recommend updates and revisions to the utility policy as necessary, and they should include, but not limited to, obviously the first one is delivering safe, reliable power. The second is the future utility needs of the city. Third is opportunities to coordinate integrated planning. And the fourth is promoting cooperation between the city, commission, boards, so forth. Included but not limited to initiatives of energy affordability, affordable housing, economic development, renewable energy, environmental stewardship, and transportation, right? So that's really the original language. Okay, I'm done with that one, thank you. And that's really what we tried to translate here, right? So we've left off affordable housing because, again, our impact on affordable housing is very little. It's very small, our influence on that. So what we did was really look at these four things and say, okay, well, how do we do this? And we really looked at, made them focus points. So as we go through this, you'll see focus points and they correspond to these bullets. And I basically copied and pasted each one of these bullets and then subjects or items that can be addressed underneath those as a sub-bullet. So let's just jump in.
Before we move that, just
Sure.
to be clear, so is this is something that your team developed, these four categories,
These four categories are coming directly from the language in the UAB policy, correct. So we added GRU shall evaluate, we added that as if we've written the policy and we're inserting our name, like insert name here, right? So that's kind of what we did,
So, Mr. Chair, it's from the
ordinance.
City Commission adopted an ordinance and it had those specific categories in the ordinance. So we're trying to follow that guidance from when the City Commission created the Utility Advisory Board.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So that 2445 date is in the ordinance?
That date is not, that date is not in the ordinance directly.
Right.
Okay.
That's a resolution.
A resolution.
And it's net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045.
With no flexibility for that date? Relative to, what do you call it, you're about ready to go into an IRP for 20 years, okay? Some of those decisions are gonna be for assets that are gonna last as long as 20 years, okay? A 2045 date like that, I just think there's risk in there of making bad decisions based upon a date certain like that. That's just me, but I'm sorry, but that's a risk.
I also believe that, that's was one reason why I'm trying to key it up with the PPA's goal of 2050. I think there'd be more, the risk would be less, and the cost will be probably less. we wouldn't be running through a cost benefit ratio analysis, trying to scramble around 2045. You know, I'm gonna be long gone, but you know, so it's problematic with me. You know.
And just to jump in real quick, so this city commission, or in the previous city commission, when they say 2045, they can't, in anything that they do, say what the next commission can do or cannot do. You can't make a ruling that says no future commission can change this. So this is always up for discussion at some level. I mean, in ways, I think the timing is actually pretty, to your point, John, that a lot of the equipment we're talking about is 20-year equipment. The IRP is going to be coming in right about that time. And so I think the timing is kind of interesting, actually.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, if you feel constrained to be 2045 rather than with 10 years plus or minus that, but you could be making choices that are not the wisest choices because you have less information now than you will have 5 years from now.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was set as an aspirational goal, not so much as a date certain.
And I understand that, and
So
that's
it's-
what I'm getting at. But an aspiration becomes a policy. That's something different. That's what I'm saying. It devolves into a policy that then becomes decisions, that then becomes an IRP, and boy, you're on a roll that you can't turn around.
But I think with the IRP, that we see price tags, people may change.
Yeah, so
goals.
I think all of this is great discussion, and I think it's a discussion we need to continue to have because we can't march into any financial commitments that aren't affordable, right? So I think as we get into the IRP is absolutely going to have, hey, here's what it will take to achieve this 2045 net zero, but it'll also have comparative options to that might cost different dollars. And so, I mean, that is really the purpose of the IRP, is to have this discussion of what are different options that we can do for power generation going forward, what are ones that meet the 2445 resolution, but then maybe there are others that are just comparable that may not meet that 2445 resolution as well, so that we can have this discussion as we go forward.
And my experience has been that GRU generally does not do things that are bad for GRU. So
we're not going to want to recommend anything.
Well, the last IRP said we could meet the 2045 deadline for $2 billion, which is, you know, just chump change, right? But had five big generating facilities that were all scheduled for termination because their life cycle would expire. So you didn't have too many choices, really.
So I think all of this is the IRP discussion, which we will be very lively coming here.
I'm looking forward to it. So, moving on to the first focus point. And again, this first bullet, I've kind of summarized under a title or heading, delivering safe, reliable operations, kind of a description that is copied and pasted from those 4 items that I just showed you. And then items to address under that, really. Talking about and adding details. So how safety shall remain of paramount importance to GRU's customers and employees. You know, why is that important? What kind of things will we look at to make sure that that happens? GRU shall design, operate, and maintain its system to maintain compliance with applicable environmental and regulatory. There's supposed to be requirements there, so that's my fat finger mistake for not getting all of that. But again, an idea of 4 focus areas, right? And then items that fall underneath that to add detail and really flesh out and round out, okay, here's where we're going and why.
This seems like the easy one. No, I don't know. Too many people are saying, no, well, let's do it unsafely or violate.
Right. So moving on to the next one, energy planning. Again, that first one is just a copy and paste from that 4th bullet. And here's what we talk about: integrated resource plan. Really saying we'll do it on a periodic basis. It's a guide towards the community energy needs. and it's going to do these things: environmental, economic, and social balance in its industry. So again, that discussion that you're having now is the same discussion that we have every day, is what is going to be the best balance for us to get there. If it's economically unfeasible, then that's not an option that we can put forward, right? So looking at those from that, again, that triple bottom line approach. Overall, we're going to reduce emissions and increase renewable energy. We're going to maintain a diverse energy portfolio and then have a reliable and resilient grid. And then there's fleshing out that goes on underneath all of those items. Next focus point is progress to net zero. Implementing solutions that enable incremental and long-term reductions in carbon emissions while we're maintaining system reliability and resiliency. Establishing a baseline, basically how are we going to track this? Tracking incremental reductions of utilities' power generation and emissions, and then providing customer education and engagement efforts. Part of this is also a lot of folks just don't know what we do. They get a bill from us and we ask them to pay it, but what are they paying for, right? And really making an effort to engage. How are we going to do that? What is entailed in that? What is the goal of that?
Excuse me, Eric, I know I'm getting into nits here, but your definition of net zero means what?
That's a very interesting question. So we're actually going through the exercise of defining what that net zero means. So there are different terms. Some is carbon neutral, some is 100% renewable, some is net zero. So what we're saying is that basically if we have emissions from a carbon source, that we're going to offset it somewhere else. Right.
Okay.
Correct. Also, well, I'm probably going to throw a grenade out there, but we'll do it. When you look at our net zero, there are also carbon-free emissions that you can include in that. And so when that is the case, then that opens up the door
Or
to
carbon
other things.
capture.
Or carbon capture, correct. So those become options in net zero. Okay, so we've covered this one. And really the last point is energy affordability and equity. Promoting initiatives for energy affordability, environmental stewardship, and energy equity. And these are topics that, again, how are we going to approach or make sure that these are covered in this policy? Environmental justice, rate planning and determination, things like time of use rates and different rate structures for different customers to help affordability. Fair and equitable rates and programs from all customers. You can include LEAP in there. You can include many other things that fall underneath those customer programs. Provide programs and services that reduce customer energy consumption and bills, increase customer engagement, and empower them to control their own energy destiny. AMI probably falls under there. What are we going to do with AMI to make sure that we are achieving this goal? And also affordability of essential energy services. We know that there is a portion of our population that is extremely energy burdened, where they pay a larger percentage of their income to energy. So how do we make sure that we keep that affordable and that all the essential energy needs they require, we can provide at a price that they can afford? And really, that's it. And I'm opening it up for discussion. And again, in conclusion, this is a proposal for a discussion on how we answer this question. We've kind of walked through what our thought process is with, intent and end use. And then ultimately, I believe we both have a goal to create a policy that we can implement that will then inform decisions and inform how business is done day to day. So with that, I am done, and we can discuss.
Yes, Jason.
So two things. One is that, and I wasn't one of the folks that was involved with the original policy. I kind of walked in at the tail end of it. But from what I understand of reading that policy, it was a city and utility energy policy. And when I hear you talk and I see the points you brought, it sounds to me like we're really dialing that back to basically a utility policy. I'm not opposed to that per se, because it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is like, let's kind of stay in our lane, talk about what we can talk about with sort of expertise and realm of what we can actually affect, and that's totally fine with me. But I think it merits, if we're going to take that approach and we're going to agree that's what we're doing, it merits revisiting the conversation with the city commission, which also has a significantly different composition than it did when these conversations started, and seeing, A, if that's what they still want, and B, if they are interested in a more citywide energy policy, then how is this process going to interface with relevant departments, other entities, and whatnot that could perhaps create a larger policy, city and utility policy. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, I hope that this was a thing that was lacking for me from the original policy, and I hope that we'll see more of it even within this kind of dialed back version, and that's more discussion of the human capital at GRU. I'm glad you have that point in there about safety. Obviously, that's paramount, but nothing that we're doing in terms of sustainability and equity and all the other things we're trying to accomplish can come on the backs of GRU staff. And especially, you know, having gone through the orientation, seeing what's happening with vacancies and GRU having to compete with our workers going other places, I just think that that human capital piece needs to be really forefront of this conversation. So those are my 2 points, just kind of thinking about that moving forward.
Yeah.
Thanks for the summary.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just respond to one thing from Member Foltz? So, to kind of acknowledge your comment about and the reality of, hey, we have a different board here, the city commission's a different board, I think that is probably the primary driver of why to go back to the ordinance language instead of trying to figure out what people's intent were or what people's directions were. Here is an ordinance that kind of lays that out. And I think that's why Eric and his team kind of used that as the basis of how to do it. And it really does say it's a utility policy. The utility board shall develop and recommend a utility policy for consideration and adoption by the city commission, and shall evaluate energy and utility issues based on the triple bottom line approach. And so we kind of use that, and the outline that Eric presented, I mean, if you look at the actual language, it is just following that. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that's sort of why we did it, because it's like, okay, people were saying this and that and have different direction. Well, here's the actual ordinance, and we wanted to follow that. So I just wanted to add that, sorry.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts. First of all, I really like the more focused outline that you presented. I did get the sense when we were working on this before that, well, I don't know where it came from, but I heard several people a couple times compare it to it's a comprehensive plan for GRU. And a comprehensive plan for a municipality encompasses a lot more than what GRU does. And so I got the sense that we might have been reaching to make this a beefier document than it needed to be. Having said that, I do think that there should be an element regarding how GRU interfaces with the development community, because things like connection fees, construction standards, multiple review cycles, increased engineering costs, all that stuff does affect not only affordable housing, but the cost of housing in general. So, you know, I don't know how detailed it needs to be, but I think it needs to be given consideration.
Would you say that fall, and I think there's some good points, does that fall within your current framework, or where would that fall within your framework that you laid out?
Well, Chair members, again, this is a discussion on how we are proposing what we think should go in there. It's definitely not limited by that, right? And I really do appreciate the point of human capital, because that is becoming something that is more and more of an issue and more of a concern as that vacancy factor goes up. The workload on the folks that are left goes up as well. And so there's fear of burnout and other negative issues with that. So putting together something that says, yeah, we're going to focus on this or what have you, I definitely think may fall into that. And how we interface with developers, I'm sure there's a place for it to fold in, and I think there could be some discussion about that. And again, what the intent was, as Tony said, was really going back to, well, what did they ask for in the beginning? and how do we deliver that? And there may be a spot, I believe, where it falls under some of those items to be able to address that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll jump in too. I think there's the future utility needs of the city. So I think that addresses, we could fold in the human capital part in there, because that is really the human capital. The folks in the utility are the ones that are going to be operating systems and growing systems, as well as the development interaction. And just so we all know, the utility builds plants, but the development community, it's really that coordination and partnership that really defines a lot of how our system grows, the linear system. Because it's where we don't do a lot of, hey, we're gonna build it and then they'll come type of stuff. It's really the partnership with the development community. As development is occurring, we're building our system there along as a partner with the development community to provide those services. So I really think both of those probably fold under the future utility needs of the city. And it makes sense. It's important, like things like that are important to acknowledge. They are major parts of how the utility operates, and sometimes they're taken for granted or they're put on the back. And so I think it is important to acknowledge those in this policy.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the work you guys have done. I think there's some really good stuff to help focus us. I think, as someone who was there through the whole thing, there was a discussion with the city commission, oh, should we limit it to GRU? No, I don't feel like you need to do that. But it was just a general go forth and prosper almost kind of thing. And I think I like the much more focused, stick to because policy should be something in my mind that's pretty small and concise. We have a policy of supporting developers and minimizing, whatever. So it's not prescriptive. It's something people can refer to and say, hey, are we doing that? Are we considering the developers when we make this new ordinance? So it just should be something also so people actually read it. It's not horribly long. And because I can tell you when members of GRU who are here saw the policy, the former general, I think, you saw hair loss and they're like, you have no idea what you're asking and the implications of this.
So with that being said, Eric, what would be the next steps? What's the thought on the next steps from here?
So the next steps is we can either go, bullet by bullet, focus point by focus point, maybe take a workshop and go through the first one of, safe, reliable, cost-effective utilities. Maybe we sit down and we take a workshop and kind of flesh that out. And then the next one, we move on to the next focus point. That's in my head how I thought it could work. And so I believe that would give an opportunity to have folks kind of mull over what's coming next and what may want to be included, but also kind of, like you said, keep that discussion focused so we know what we're here to do and come out with, right? So that's my recommendations. Let's go focus point by focus point, and we can bring some things as suggestions and definitely, chair and members, when we sit down to discuss, bring all those. And then at the end of the day, after we get through all of this, the goal again is to walk away with a policy that we can read, that we can adopt, and we can refer to.
So what do you guys think? How do you feel? It was not a voting item, but how do you feel about moving forward with this plan? What are you suggesting?
Sounds reasonable to me.
It sounds reasonable to me.
Well, I have to say that I find it a big nothing, absolute nothing. It's a big zero. It doesn't change anything. If that were adopted, nothing would happen. If it's not adopted, nothing would happen. It doesn't bring about anything. It doesn't direct. It doesn't oversee. Doesn't guide anything. It's just a statement of current activities. It's current responsibilities. That's not what a policy should be at all. A good policy would say something like, our policy is to have net zero carbon emissions by 2045, and here are all the things that we're going to do to achieve that. And so you'd have thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. This doesn't have any sort of implication for action. I find it absolutely a waste of time.
Okay. And just to be clear, if we're saying the same thing, what was presented was not policy. It was an outline that we're going to build policy on.
Correct.
Well, it was presented as a draft statement of policy.
That wasn't my understanding.
outline.
It was an outline. It was saying we're gonna have these 4 areas of policy, that we're gonna put policy into those 4 areas, but.
Well, I think it's a total sham. I think it's bogus. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't indicate that we're engaged in anything that has any value when you sit here and mouth it.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right, with that,
So the intent would be we'd come back and we'd work out those details further underneath the outline things in
Yes.
future meetings. So that's the, what
And
we
there's
were
probably language from the original document that we
could go into that.
can pull and refine and still use. It's just, I think narrowing the focus is definitely the right direction to go.
and then one thing, I'm not sure if GRU staff would take this on, it would help, I think it might help us to just talk, to have something that talks about what is policy, here are examples of policy, because I think it's really easy to drift from policy to implementation.
Yep.
And to keep us focused on, this is a policy document, which can be quite boring and or not feel floaty, because the next step, and the plan all along was, we were gonna work on a policy, and then next was implementation, which is actually, a lot of IRP stuff is really, and so this, a policy document is very useful when you're doing our IRP work to say, are we still within the policy? But just to keep us focused, because we drift, and so when we got the feedback from the public, I can tell you the feedback from the public was lower GRU had nothing to do with policy discussion, quite honestly. Because people don't like to talk about policy, it's very ethereal and boring, so. But if you can help with that, that would be helpful. Just nothing specific, just here's what is policy, here's what's not policy, just a little training on policy, I think would be helpful.
So Chair members, we actually did that kind of internally before we sat down to kind of go through this. So absolutely, we can put something together that addresses that, or at least some brief talking points to what that may mean.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. All right, if we are.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, thank you.
Good stuff. We are up to public comment.
It's
Any members of the public
all
still move?
staff and law enforcement, so
All the public seem to dry up.
They are public.
it's up to you all.
Member comment.
I just had one question. Pardon me if I brought this up recently, and we've already settled this, but I did want to inquire about planning for APPA summer conference.
Oh, okay, I don't remember.
Okay, good. I want to make sure I wasn't being redundant. But, so the dates are set, it's going to be this summer, and I know that, it takes a bit of time, because we have to decide who's going to go, and then travel, and all that stuff is being lined up. And so, and our next meeting isn't until it's going to be a while. So I just do want to get that on an agenda, at least have some initial discussion. And I do want to mention particularly, since she's not here, that Member Sperlingwood has expressed interest in going and has never gone.
Okay.
So I did want to put that out there. But if we could talk about that relatively soon, so that folks can be thinking about who might go this year. And get that figured out.
What I can do is put together some information and send it out to you all ahead of the next workshop, which is at the end of this month, and we can discuss it there as part of the workshop.
Gives us plenty of time to,
It's going to be in Nashville this time?
No, Seattle.
Nashville was last time.
Just a point of, have people read the, what do you call it, the last IRP? They've been
I
going,
looked at it
okay.
over the last weeks.
Are people interested in what other utilities do on our RFPs or on something like this? The reason I ask is I pulled out, what do you call it, not FPLs, but the last company I worked with, their IRP. This is public information. The foreword was 26 pages. It was 303 pages. Okay. And of course, they were talking for $17 billion. But it was kind of interesting the way they had that set up. So if you wanted something to just page through, what do you call it, and see how that that lines up with what we've done in the past. What do you call it? It's just another data point. You can take all 303 pages, delete it in one stroke. Okay, but I can send that if anybody's interested in it.
If you want to send it to Robin, she can send it to all the members.
Okay.
And as always, we can't comment back on it, but that would be
Yeah,
appreciated.
I understand.
No, that would be great. It's always interesting for other people.
A little light reading for the weekend.
I want to read it.
Anyone else have any comments? If not, our next meeting is the workshop on February 28th, which I will not be here, so you have the gavel. I'll be back for the March 9th regular meeting. I believe we'll be starting
Your budget.
budget workshops at that point.
Do you want to be in the till for APPA this year?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'll have to think.
okay. Maybe if you have some time to think between now and then, because
Yeah.
presumably we might even choose at that meeting who's
Oh,
going to
okay.
go.
I'd be interested, but I'll have to see what life looks like at that point.
So real quick, so for that 28th workshop, sorry, we can talk about the APPA. The plan was to do the Origis, a more in-depth look at the Origis contract and the path moving forward. And then we could hit a little bit of the energy policy as well. We could start that. I'm looking at Eric as well. So that could be the three.
That's at the workshop.
The workshop on the 28th,
Nothing budget related at that point?
not on the 28th, right?
No,
Right.
we pushed that to the 9th because I went.
Yeah, because you were going to be out. That's right.
All right,
That's it.
thank you.